Hey guys, Dr. Ben here, Functional Medicine Centers. Welcome. So excited to have you on today. It's been a while since we've done a deep dive into some of the latest research and updates on COVID. So here we go. We're going to get into a lot of the new research coming out, a lot of the new treatments, different thoughts and things that are going on out there. You hear all types of different information, pros and cons. Does it work? Does it not? I don't know. I'm not treating patients like this on a daily basis, but what I do know is that I can scour through research. I can talk to doctors that are using these things. I can look at other information, and I can give you some ideas on what I am seeing. So a lot of you probably saw yesterday or earlier this weekend that the convalescent plasma was approved by the FDA as an EUA. EUA is emergency use approval for that plasma. So what this means, plasma, a lot of you probably have heard about this as when you were that struggling college student or anybody you know, they go and do plasma donations. It's not like a blood donation where it's actually where they're just giving blood. They're actually getting plasma and getting paid for it. So that's probably where you've heard of plasma before. But plasma is the part of blood that's going to hold a lot of the cells that they're going to be floating around in there, as opposed to just the fluid in there or some other parts of the blood. So the plasma is going to hold what are called antibodies. Hey Michelle, good to see you out there. Hey, anybody jumping on? Go ahead and let me know that you're watching. Let me know where you're watching in from. Love to see everybody out there. Okay, so the plasma has these little antibodies in there, and you've heard of antibody testing, you've heard of antibodies with COVID, but it's with any virus we will have antibody production, and the antibody tags something for removal. So let's say, I like to think about it this way, let's say our military is overseas and they're wanting to blow up some little hut over there. Hey Janet, good to see you. And so the Navy SEAL has this laser pointer and it's putting this dot over on that little hut, and then the drone comes in and shoots its missile and it finds that laser dot and blows it up. So that's basically what the antibody is doing. The antibody is tagging something for destruction. The antibody is not the immune system that destroys, it's the immune system that tags. So that's why it's so important to have this thought process, even in an autoimmune condition. If somebody has Hashimoto's, autoimmune thyroid, they have antibodies to their thyroid, it's going to be tagging that thyroid for destruction. Hey Tanya, good to see you. How are things down in Florida? I imagine pretty warm. Hopefully the hurricanes aren't going to get down that far. So the antibodies are going to tag it for destruction. If it happens in our own tissue, that's called autoimmunity. If it happens outside of our own tissues, it's going to go and tag those viruses, bacteria, whatever it is, and then the immune system comes in and destroys it. Nelda, I'll get to that in just a second about how long the antibodies last. So here's what we're looking at is those antibodies are going to tell the immune system next time you get exposed to something, go ahead and rev up and attack, and it'll be a whole lot more likely for that to happen. And so it's going to be this process of attacking, recognizing it, the virus goes away, you might get exposed again, but the body's going to be able to jump in and attack right away. So Nelda has a great question here. How long will the antibodies last in the body? And what we look at is that the research is showing that the half-life is about 78 days is all that we're seeing for the antibodies. Hey Bonnie, good to see you out there. So not very long actually, and that's the research. They've tested people, found antibodies, retested again, and they don't have the antibodies left. So if you're looking at donating some plasma, donating antibodies, if you have had a COVID infection, do it pretty quick because odds are it will go away quickly. But I've got some other research that's encouraging that even if you don't still have antibodies, you're probably going to be very, very safe and not have to worry about COVID-19 again. So what do? Well, the body will go through and it will attack viruses that come in based off the targeting mechanism. The targeting mechanism is those antibodies, and this is not a new concept. They were even talking about it in March and April, and they were collecting people's antibodies at that point and giving plasma donations. So they've been talking about this for a while. Mayo Clinic went through about 20,000 people in this study, and the interesting part, they had actually done it with a lot of Black and Hispanic people as well, which that's one of the big problems with the latest vaccine that they're looking at, is that they had like 2 or 3% of everybody that they were testing the vaccine on were Black or Hispanic, which we know that 50% of the deaths with COVID-19 have been from Black and Hispanic people. So obviously we want to see how is it affecting them, and every race is going to be affected a little bit differently as well as far as potential side effects. But the Mayo Clinic had a very high percentage of minorities in their study, so that was well covered there. Basically, they take the plasma, they spin down the antibodies, isolate those antibodies to COVID-19, and inject them into another person that has COVID-19, that has an active infection. So here's where the 35% basically improvement or decrease mortality came in that President Trump was talking about the other day. So with people that had been injected with the plasma within the first 3 days of having their infection identified and being in the hospital, they had a fatality rate of about 8.7%, and this was a 7-day fatality rate. For people that were found to have the plasma injections after 4 days, they had a 12% fatality rate. So interesting, they still did plasma injections on both of these, but what they found was they got to get it in early. And this is exactly what the Henry Ford Center up in Detroit, Michigan found as well with hydroxychloroquine, was that 82% of the people that they injected or that they gave the hydroxychloroquine were in the first 24 hours, 91% were in the first 48 hours. And that's why they had such good success with the hydroxychloroquine versus some of these other studies that they were looking at where they had done later, like when they were on ventilators or when they were really, really sick already. So what we're looking at with the plasma is the same as hydroxychloroquine and a lot of other drugs here. So what we need to remember is that no matter what you're doing, if somebody is starting to get sick, you've got to get this found out as soon as possible. What is one of the best ways to know if somebody's getting infection? For some of you that have been listening and following for a while, you get a pulse oximeter, and that pulse oximeter is going to tell you when the amount of oxygen in your blood starts dropping, and when it should be 96, 97, 98, but if you're hitting that 92, 93, 94, and it traditionally is in that 96, 97, 98, very good chance that's one of the best signs that someone is dealing with COVID, even better than fever state. So all these schools that are opening up and they're doing their little laser temperature gauge on the forehead for the kids coming in, only 50% of people with COVID have some type of a fever. So it's really not that accurate of a gauge of whether somebody has COVID or not. So what we have to do is we've got to look from other perspectives as to how somebody is sick. Fatigue is a big one. It doesn't have to be just this big cough right away, but everything that we're looking, whether that's hydroxychloroquine, whether that's the plasma, all of these things say that we've got to get it done as soon as feasibly possible. So that's the big thing that we're looking at, is you've got to get that plasma in within the first 3 days. The fatality rate was 8.7%, but if you wait to 4 days plus, it jumps up to 12% fatality rate. So that was one of the big things that the Mayo Clinic found. There's been over 70,000 patients treated so far. This is according to the FDA, treated so far with the convalescent plasma. What we know is that when you get that injection, because it can take a while for your body's own antibodies to start being produced, and so what this does is they come in and they start tagging right away, and the body can start destroying those while your body starts to bump up to that point where they're able to start killing those off. Hey Lori, yeah, some of us have hot flashes, not fevers. Good to see you out there. So next thing I want to talk about, so if you've got any other questions on the antibodies there, Yeah, let's see. I think that was it for questions. Yeah, so if you have an antibody test and it shows up positive, by all means go and donate that plasma. That would be great. Hey Kendra, we'll get on to masks in a second here. Let me go over ivermectin. Give me a thumbs up if anybody's heard about ivermectin lately, and I'll explain what this one is and what they're recommending as far as that. So ivermectin, it's been used on animals for years and years. It's an anti-parasitic. So in the veterinary world, ivermectin is very popular. They use it for a lot of different things, and now it's expanded to all over the world. The World Health Organization, if you look on their website, they've got a lot of information on ivermectin and how it can help so many different places around the world that are dealing with parasites. So ivermectin, this study was looked at in Australia. At first, way back in April, they put ivermectin, it was called in vitro, meaning that they put it into basically a petri dish or a test tube, and they put it in with cells that were exposed to COVID-19, and that ivermectin, even within the first 48 hours, or even 24 to 48 hours, destroyed that COVID-19. So it basically, this ivermectin can inhibit the virus from going in and out of the cells, which is what causes the replication. So it can block the replication of of COVID-19. In Australia, they just put together this kind of this mix of three different things that are very helpful to combat COVID-19. And so this was that one in April that was based on a peer-reviewed study, even though it was in vitro, it wasn't on humans. You know, you'd figure, hey, way back in April, we should really be cranking up on the studies. I haven't heard a lot about it as far as other studies go, unfortunately. So basically, they combine the ivermectin with the doxycycline and the zinc, and those are going to be really able to, the doxycycline is an antibiotic, and that's going to fight off other infections. The zinc is a great antiviral. We know they're using that with hydroxychloroquine, zinc, hydroxychloroquine, and the zithromycin, which is another antibiotic. Block co-infections, drive that zinc into the cells. Zinc is one of the best antivirals out there, and then get the anti whatever it is. So hydroxychloroquine can help. It's actually an anti-parasitic as well. So these have been shown, this ivermectin has been shown, especially in Australia. They've been using it a bunch, and that's another step that people are thinking about that could be helpful with COVID. So again, does it work, does it not? We don't know for sure yet, but the great news is that there are things out there that people can try and they can use, and if their doctor is open to it, you've got to be able to get that. So, but again, what they recommend in this one is that it has to be treated ASAP. So how do you do that? Well, you can check your fever, but only 50% of the people get a fever. But the pulse oximeter, you can just get them on Amazon. Probably the best way to be able to tell if you're getting coming down with COVID or not. Unfortunately, as cold and flu season comes in, people are just going to be rampant with, oh my gosh, I've got a little bit of a cough, I've got a little bit of a sneezing, fever, whatever it is it COVID, is it flu, whatever. And so I feel for the urgent cares, because they're just going to get swamped with people that are just worried about whatever it is. But here's one of the things you do. If you just get the flu, if you just get a cold, whatever it is, your pulse ox probably will not go down. But if it does, then it probably is COVID. But if it stays the same, probably is not COVID. Obviously, you still want to get tested, but that's definitely one of the things you can if you're waiting for those results, because a lot of the people are saying that it's going to take 7 to 10 days to get the results back. And so by that point, your quarantine's already over, which is interesting. Look up CDC changing their quarantine recommendations. They actually are saying now that that for travel and everything else, the CDC is not recommending a 14-day quarantine, which was kind of interesting as well. New update there. Another study that I was looking at, we've talked about the T cells as well, and a lot of people, the question was, how long do those antibodies last? Well, we see that a 78-day is that half-life that we expect those antibodies to start fading away at that point. You're welcome, Teresa. Good to see you out there. So another study we've been talking about, this 40 to 60% of the people have T cells to COVID-19, but what we're seeing now is another study just came out, 81% of the people that they tested had T cells to COVID-19 because of other coronaviruses. So it's going to be close enough. They've never been exposed. They've never had an infection. And yet this coronavirus is close enough to other coronaviruses, which we've had for millions of years, that it's not going to cause the body to actually have a full infection. It's going to be able to kill it off a whole lot faster. And so that's the great part of what we're looking at, is even if these antibodies fade away, you're still going to have T cells for it. A lot of you have T cells and you don't even know it. And that's why we've seen dozens of patients that one person in their household has had COVID-19 and other people have not. And sometimes nobody else in the family has had it. So it's not a everybody's going to get it type of situation, because so many people already have these T cells. And keep your fingers crossed, the hope is that there's enough already, and then that percentage of people that do get infected get their new T cells, we hit that 80% rate, which is going to be at that level of herd immunity, and we'll get there a whole lot faster. That's interesting again, because last week Yahoo came out and they said that only 42% of the people that they surveyed were actually going to get the vaccine. And so a couple thoughts there. One, because it's being rushed and people know that it should take 3 to 5 years to get a good vaccine, safe, is it going to work, all those things. But unfortunately, we're going to rush this one through, and in 6 to 9 months, there'll probably be a vaccine out there, kind of like that one in Russia. Anybody want to raise their hand and go volunteer to get injected with that Russian vaccine? Probably not. So unfortunately, it's going to rush through. A lot of people aren't going to get it because they're worried about the safety and all those things. Other thoughts on that? Moderna, that's the number one. Just had the $1.52 billion from the government given to them to make 100 million vaccines ready, and they don't even have it yet. They've produced 0 vaccines in their life of their company. They've never produced a human vaccine. This messenger RNA that the vaccine is that they're working on, 0 the number of human messenger RNA vaccines that have been successfully done. So there's a lot of what ifs, and so we've got to be coming up with other solutions. We've got to be looking at other things, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, plasma, whatever it is. You've got to research, and you've got to have a game plan if you or a loved one does get infected. So the people that were talking about the T cells, they were actually talking about a T cell vaccine. Instead of doing antibody-based vaccines, they do T cells and those T cell proteins, and they're going to be able to stimulate that immune response in the body sooner. So different thought there on the vaccine as well. But overall, I think it's great the FDA has approved the convalescent plasma. It's one more tool, one more option. You should have the right as a patient for you and your doctor to say, hey, what's going to be our best course of action here? What should we do? What should we try? And if you as a patient, I've had multiple people I know that their doctors did not recommend hydroxychloroquine or other things, but if you ask for it, they can give those things. So for a lot of people, they've asked over the last couple months, hey, how do I get this? If there's an issue, you ask for it, and almost every single doctor will be okay prescribing things for you, especially with something like this where nobody really has a solution. There's no good answers out there. If there's things that look like they might be helpful and they're not going to cause problems, you should go for it, because otherwise, really, there is no other options out there. So the plasma, the ivermectin, the hydroxychloroquine, all of these things need to be in your arsenal, and you need to be thinking about it, researching it, looking into those different things. So, all right, guys, hope this was helpful for you. I know it's a lot of information out there, people saying this works, this doesn't work, but you've just got to educate yourself. You've got to look at the basics, look at the true science of what's happening with the plasma. Even Dr. Fauci was kind of poo-pooing it. if there's no side effect, if there's no downside, and there's a potential upside at this point, I mean, we got to do it. When they were giving ventilators to people and killing people on those without having any research, they're always like, oh, we need double-blind studies and all this stuff, and it's like there were no double-blind studies on ventilators, and they killed a lot of people from putting those on there. So we've got to jump in. We've got to do the work that we can, educate ourselves, keep your body as strong as possible, because ultimately, I would much rather you never get to that point, or a loved one never get to that point where you have to make these decisions on what drug you want to take. So keep your body as strong as possible. It's all about the terrain. It's not about the bug. And I prefer to stay strong over stay safe any day of the week. So, all right, guys, hope you learned a lot. If you've got questions, go ahead and pop those down below. Share this with anybody that you know that is wondering, what is convalescent plasma? What is the ivermectin, what is the hydroxychloroquine, any of these different drugs, send them over this way, and then it's a good starting point for them to educate more. So great to see everybody, and you make it a great day, okay, guys?